Assignment number 2, harm reduction, Michelle Core. I would say harm reduction is an approach used in addictions that really involves providing different equipment, such as things like clean needles, pipes, tinfoil, and safe hookers, as well as other supports, such as like safe consumption sites, housing services, counseling, and like rehabs to individuals facing addictions. It really involves meeting people where they're at and assessing what they need and what supports they could benefit from and going from there. It involves, supporting individuals and making safer choices to protect their health and well being. And the idea is really that everyone, no matter if you are using substances or not, deserve care, respect, and support. I think harm reduction relates to my Miss Coswin just because it's such a big part of my life. I've personally worked in a lot of jobs where I've done outreach, and I've actually worked firsthand giving out harm reduction gear and also educating people on it. I think being in this field has really opened my eyes to how important harm reduction is, but it's also shown me how much stigma is attached to harm reduction. Um, I believe that harm reduction is really just about supporting people and reducing harm and making things like, clean needles and mental health supports and other services a part of healthcare and that everyone should be able to have access to them. I think harm reduction also aligns with my Miss Coswin because I believe in treating people with respect and meeting people where they're at in life, which is kind of exactly what harm reduction allows me to do. Harm reduction is not about judging people for using substances, but it's about supporting them and helping keep them safe, which I absolutely love. I believe that everyone kind of deserves care and support, even if they are using, and harm reduction really just focuses on helping people rather than punishing them for using substances. I think the only real hesitant part about harm reduction is that people's belief is kind of surrounding the point of that they believe harm reduction encourages drug use. Um, and just with that belief, it makes it kind of harder to, have those conversations. Um, but overall, I would say just, from my experiences working in this field and directly working with harm reduction, I have seen how much it can help people. And I know it keeps people connected to the supports that they may not have otherwise. So, altogether, I think harm reduction is a really, really positive thing. From my own work, I believe that everyone should have access to harm reduction and the supports that come with it. I believe that harm reduction is 100% healthcare and definitely needs to be discussed and talked about far more than it is, especially in our healthcare system. In hopes to eliminate some of the stigma that's really tied to harm reduction. Through my own experiences working in the field, I've seen just how important it is and how much harm reduction can really help people stay safer and connected to different supports. When it comes to the benefits of harm reduction, it really just allows people to access care without judgment and helps reduce the risks that come with substance use. It also helps people stay connected to services, which they can eventually lead them to, other supports when they feel ready, which is, really, really great. Um, in terms of limitations, I like to hope there are not many barriers to harm reduction itself. However, from my past experiences, one of the biggest challenges comes from the people seeking support. Um, Many individuals do not always know when they are ready, and there can be a lot of stigma around the idea of harm reduction. Because of this, in my work, I have always tried to do what I can to make people feel, less negative about harm reduction and help them understand that it is there just to support them and there's no judgment really attached to it. I think the limitations often depend on the individual and where they're at in their, addiction journey in their life. Everyone has different goals and different levels of readiness when it comes to, change, especially with addiction where it's such a huge change. Um, so the impact of harm reduction can vary from person to person. When working with people impacted by addiction, I believe it's important to approach them from a trauma informed, anti oppressive, and person centered lens. This means meeting people kind of where they're at and understanding that many people have experienced trauma and stigma and different barriers in their life. Harm reduction really focuses on keeping people safe and connected to supports, even if they're still using substances. From my own work personally, doing outreach and handing out harm reduction supplies, I have seen just how important these services are and how much they can help people stay connected to care. Harm reduction also aligns with my values because I believe that everyone deserves compassion and dignity and support without having that judgment. Um, One challenge with harm reduction is definitely the stigma. I know I've mentioned this before, but there's just a lot of stigma surrounding it because so many people believe it encourages substance use. However, I believe it's an important part of healthcare and that it helps reduce harm and supports people in their own journey, and is definitely something that is beneficial and valuable, and should not have that stigma. And if it does, it should definitely be more positive than what it is. Overall, I think harm reduction is a very, very, very beneficial and valuable treatment approach. I believe successful treatment definitely can come from this. And I've seen it in my own work, being on street level, making, harm reduction kits, going out on street, passing them out to individuals, and just having those conversations where quite a few of individuals have told me like they don't know where they would be without it. So I only ever really see the positive in that, and because of that, I'm very thankful for this treatment approach. Um, the only negative thing that I can really say about harm reduction is just the very, very big stigma that surrounds it. Not only from people who don't use harm reduction, but also from the people that do use harm reduction, because a lot of the times individuals who don't use harm reduction push the mentality of giving harm reduction only supports an addiction. And then I find, with the people that I interact with, they really take that to heart and they start considering harm reduction a very bad thing. Um, and so in my work, a large part of it is really just, having those conversations with individuals and letting them know that harm reduction isn't a bad thing and it's purely for, health and meeting them where they're at. And just being there and supporting those individuals in any way that I can, whether that's with harm reduction, whether that's with a conversation. Um, but yeah, the only thing really negative that I can think of with harm reduction is just the overall stigma and judgment that really comes not only from harm reduction, but also just addictions in general. Um, but overall, I do think that harm reduction in itself is very beneficial and valuable, and I am very thankful that I have had the opportunity to work really alongside it so far in my time in this field.